Excuse me, miss. Could you maybe read this princess story with me? My daddy's talking to doctors and I'm scared and lonely, and you look like someone who tells stories. 26-year-old Clover Ashford looked up from the casting script she'd been reviewing in the hospital lobby, her eyes beating those of a small girl in a wheelchair, maybe 4 years old, clutching a worn storybook, her lower body covered with a soft blanket, her expression carrying a vulnerability that immediately cracked through Clover's own discouragement. She'd been sitting here for an hour, waiting for her mother's test results, dwelling on another failed audition, wondering if she should finally give up on acting and find real work. "I'd love to," Clover said gently, setting aside her script and pulling a chair close to the wheelchair. "I'm Clover. What's your name?" "Iris, and this is my favorite book, but I can't read all the words yet, and Daddy's been so sad lately that I don't want to make him more tired by asking." The simple honesty broke Clover's heart. She took the book, a fairy tale about a brave princess who couldn't walk but saved her kingdom anyway, and began reading with full theatrical emotion, doing different voices for each character, making Iris giggle for the first time in what seemed like ages. What Clover didn't know was that 33-year-old Calloway Whitmore, standing just around the corner discussing his daughter's ongoing physical therapy with her doctor, could hear every word, could hear his daughter's laughter, a sound that had become rare since the car accident 6 months ago that killed his wife and left Iris paralyzed. Could hear a stranger bringing joy to his child when he'd been so consumed by grief and logistics that he'd forgotten how to just be present with her happiness. For 20 minutes, Clover read and performed, forgetting her own disappointments, focusing entirely on making this lonely little girl smile. When Iris's father finally appeared, tall, exhausted, grief evident in every line of his face, Clover stood awkwardly, worried she'd overstepped. "I'm so sorry, I hope it was okay. She asked me to read and I just—" "Thank you," Calloway interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "I heard you from down the hall. Her laugh, I haven't heard that sound in months. Thank you for giving her that." Clover smiled, gathering her things. As she walked away, Iris called out, "Will you come back? Please? You're the best story reader ever." Clover's eyes filled unexpectedly. "I don't know, sweetheart, but it was an honor to read with you." What Clover didn't share, what pride and exhaustion kept hidden, was that she was one more failed audition away from moving back to her small town, from admitting defeat after 5 years of struggling in LA, of working 3 waitressing jobs while chasing an acting dream that felt increasingly impossible. Her mother's cancer scare had brought her to this hospital, but her own crisis of faith had been building for months. And what Calloway didn't mention was that before his wife's death, he'd been a successful film producer, that grief had made him step away from the industry, that he'd been questioning whether to return or simply focus on being present for Iris's recovery and rehabilitation. 3 days later, Clover returned to the hospital for her mother's follow-up appointment. On impulse, she stopped by the children's wing, hoping to see if Iris might be there, and she was, sitting in the playroom, looking smaller and more alone than any child should. "Hi, Iris, remember me?" The little girl's face lit with pure joy. "You came back, you really came back." Clover spent an hour reading more stories, playing simple games, just being present. Calloway found them there, his expression unreadable, but his eyes suspiciously bright. "You didn't have to come back," he said quietly, after Iris had been taken for therapy.
"I wanted to," Clover replied honestly. "Your daughter is special, and I have time. Too much time, actually. My acting career isn't exactly demanding my attention." Something shifted in Calloway's expression. Recognition, perhaps, of shared struggle. "You're an actress?" "Trying to be, mostly failing. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because Iris asked me to come back, and nobody should break promises to a 4-year-old. What Calloway didn't tell Clover then, what he was still processing himself, was that her simple kindness to his daughter had stirred something dormant. He'd been numb for months, going through motions, but hearing genuine joy in Iris's voice had reminded him that life continued, that beauty still existed, that maybe he could find purpose again. Over the following weeks, Clover visited regularly, never asking for anything, simply reading to Iris, playing, being a consistent, gentle presence. And slowly, she became part of their difficult journey, witnessing Iris's painful physical therapy sessions, celebrating small victories, being there during setbacks, offering Calloway the kind of support he hadn't known he needed, someone who asked how he was doing and actually waited for an honest answer. "Why do you keep coming?" Calloway asked one evening after Iris had fallen asleep. "Most people offer help once, feel good about themselves, and move on." Clover was quiet for a moment. "Because when I'm here, I remember why I wanted to act in the first place, not for fame or validation, but to create moments of joy and connection. When I read to Iris, when I make her laugh despite her pain, that's the most real performance I've done in years. That matters more than any audition. What neither of them knew was that Calloway had been quietly observing Clover's interactions with Iris, the genuine emotion, the unself-conscious expressiveness, the natural talent that needed no camera or stage to be evident. And he'd been considering returning to producing, specifically for a project he'd been developing before his wife's death, a film about resilience and family and finding joy despite loss. 2 months after their first meeting, Calloway asked Clover to coffee. She expected a thank you, perhaps an awkward friend-zoning conversation. Instead, he said, "I'm producing a film. Small budget, independent, but meaningful. There's a supporting role that I think you'd be perfect for. It's not a handout. I'm offering because you're genuinely talented, and because you understand the emotional core of this story in a way most actresses wouldn't. Would you be interested?" Clover stared, certain she'd misheard. You're offering me a role? Because I read to your daughter?" "No," Calloway said firmly. "I'm offering you a role because you're a gifted actress who brings authentic emotion to every interaction, who understands vulnerability and strength simultaneously, who made my grieving daughter laugh when I couldn't. Your audition has been happening for 2 months. Every time you showed up for Iris without expecting anything in return, you've been demonstrating exactly the qualities this role requires." Tears spilled down Clover's cheeks. "I didn't do this for career opportunities." "I know," Calloway interrupted gently. "That's exactly why you deserve this one."
The film shot over 6 weeks. Clover poured everything into the role, all her understanding of struggle and hope, all her observations of Iris's resilience, all her own experience of choosing to show up despite fear and exhaustion. And when the film premiered at Sundance 9 months later, critics singled out her performance as luminous and heartbreakingly authentic. But the real premiere happened earlier, in a hospital conference room where Calloway had arranged a private screening for Iris and the medical staff who'd helped her. As Iris watched, entranced, she turned to Clover and said with perfect 4-year-old wisdom, "You're a real princess, not because you're in movies, but because you were kind when I was scared. That's what princesses do." Clover knelt beside the wheelchair, holding Iris's small hand. "And you taught me something important, sweet girl. That success isn't about recognition or fame. It's about showing up for people who need you, about creating moments of light in dark times, about choosing connection over ambition. You gave me back my purpose." Because true kindness doesn't expect returns, doesn't perform for recognition, simply responds when someone needs us, reading stories to lonely children, offering presents to grieving fathers, showing up consistently even when it's inconvenient. And sometimes that pure compassion becomes the bridge to opportunities we'd stopped believing possible, proving that the universe rewards those who give freely, not because it's transactional, but because genuine goodness creates ripples that eventually return to us, transformed, not as payment, but as recognition of what was always there. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. Let's spread more stories of kindness and hope together.